Over the next few weeks, I'm going to post videos for a Python and finance course. And in this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the course and why you should be interested in using Python for financial analysis. So this is my financial education site. I have an outline of the course here. So I'll open this in a new tab. So this is a course outline. And what it's going to have is a video, so I'll post the videos here, links to the videos, and it also importantly has Codelab notebooks. And these are going to be an important aspect of the course. I'm going to go over them in a little bit. And like I said, so one, you can see everything that we're going to cover by looking at these Codelab notebooks or the outline. But so jumping in here, why might you be interested in Python for financial analysis? So what I'm going to show, and this goes over a little bit of what we're going to talk about here. The course is divided into 4 modules, each with 3 to 4 sessions per module. And in the first session, I relate Python to other tools that you might use, particularly Excel. What we're going over in this course is how to do tasks that you might 5-10 years ago that you might have done in Excel, how to do those in Python. And that's the idea of this course, right? Core financial analyst, investment analyst type tasks, and we're going to take those tasks and we're going to do them in Python. So now I often joke around with students. If you look at on YouTube, often you'll say, Python for finance, and it'll come up, a video come up that says how to create a trading bot in Python, right? So I joke around that there's no trading bots in this course because I've worked a long time as an analyst before going to academia. I have a lot of students that go and use Python in their financial analyst roles, and very few people in finance actually create trading bots, right? So what we're going to do here is, again, stuff that you might have done in Excel, you might be doing now in Excel, and we're going to do it in Python. Now, a little bit of why you might want to use Python. Python is going to, and I'm going to go over this throughout the course, but Python is going to allow us to do calculations that we would do in Excel. It's going to allow us to do those same calculations more quickly. It's also going to give us capabilities to do calculations that we just flat out cannot do in Excel. A really important aspect, one that I don't think is noted enough, and really you have to have worked as a financial analyst to kind of note this, but in Excel you generally tend to redo the same calculation too often, right? And then you also tend to redo other calculations that other people have done, you redo in your own spreadsheet. And the reason being is a spreadsheet is not a natural tool to share calculations, right? You kind of open the spreadsheet, you got to figure out what other people have done, where they put stuff. It's a very clumsy way to share calculations. Python, what it's going to allow you to do is do a calculation once and then be able to reuse that same calculation anywhere with sort of minimal effort. It's also very powerfully, it's going to allow you to use calculations that other people have done. So we're going to do portfolio optimization. You can just pull in portfolio optimization that somebody else has done and use that code, right? So a really great aspect of Python over Excel is you save a lot of time because you don't have to redo everything in Python, right? You do it once and then it's good. Also, along with that, Python is really easy to automate. So along kind of somewhat similar to that aspect is it's very easy to automate, and then Python has really great visualization. So those are a couple reasons, and as we go through this course, you're going to see why Python is going to allow you to do more compelling financial analysis, to do it more quickly, which allows you to move on and do a lot more stuff. One thing that I'll talk about right off the top here, sometimes I tell students, hey, you should definitely learn some Python, and a finance student will say, well, I'm not a programmer, right? So a distinction is not often made enough, is between the user of a programming language and a programmer, right? So we're going to be users. We're just going to use the language. What a programmer would do is a programmer would extend the language. They would create new data structures, right? New, maybe a data structure to hold an order book, and then new functions and methods to act on that order book, to act on that new data structure. So what a programmer does is takes a core language and gives that language more capabilities. We're not going to do that here. we're going to simply be users. We're going to say, okay, somebody else created this capability, let's use that, right? Somebody else created this capability, let's use that. We want to import an Excel spreadsheet, so we're going to use pandas, right? Somebody already wrote the code to do that, so all we have to do is say, read that in, tell, pandas read that in. So much of what we're doing here is not any different than what we do in Excel, right? You write functions in Excel, you write calculations and so forth. We're just going to do that in Python, right? So this is not so this is not a big stretch from Excel. I'm not asking finance majors to become programmers. I'm just saying take those same tasks that you did in Excel. Let's learn how to do them in Python, right? We're going to be a user here. Okay, good. So let me go through briefly a little bit about what we're going to cover in this course, and then I'm going to dive into a Codelab Notebook because those are going to be really important. So in the first module here, I don't know if I mentioned it, but we have 4 modules and they're numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, not 1, 2, 3, 4 because Python starts at 0. So maybe we get used to that right now. So that's why we start with module 0 here. And then, so we have some sessions. I talked a little bit about this, Python relative to other tools. That's just a video. In the next session, we jump into an actual Codelab Notebook. And here we just learn some basic control flow, creating functions. This is, in some way, the kind of hardest session. But here, we're just learning how to interact with Python, particularly within a Codelab Notebook. And then the next session is maybe one of the most important. And this is where you learn how to find packages, how to import and use packages, right? And so this is going to give us all the capabilities that we use later. Right, so this is extremely important, particularly moving from an Excel-centric world to Python, right? This is what we have in Python that we don't really have in Excel. Next, we jump into spreadsheet type data, and we're going to use the pandas library for this. And so in this module, we do typical financial analyst type tasks, corporate finance type tasks. And what I have here are exercises. So in each Codelab Notebook, I have an exercise for you. And so you can see, in this Codelab Notebook, we're going to, what each exercise is modeled on is I try to think of, questions that when I was an entry-level analyst, my boss might ask me. I come in the morning and my boss asks me a question, so I have to kind of get some supporting data to get an answer to that question. So what we look at here is whether institutional ownership, increases in institutional ownership, increase ROE. The financial theory behind this is there's an agency problem, and I go over this in this session, so I won't go too into it now, but there's an agency problem, right? And if there's institutional owners or block holders, that should lessen that agency problem. And that lessened agency problem should manifest itself as a higher return on equity. So we're going to go ahead and pull some data, host it on a website, an Excel spreadsheet, host it on a website, pull that data in. And here's where we start to look at, cleaning up the data, making sure the data was imported properly, and then answering that question. And we do, I think we find that higher levels of institutional ownership do have a positive effect on return on equity. In the next session, in here we pull in CSV data hosted on a website, the New York ISO website. And what we look at is, we'll look at, again, this is electricity data. So the fuel mix is how you produce electricity. Right? So during the day, there's higher demand for electricity, and so your fuel mix tends to be different than how you produce electricity overnight when there's less demand. So during the day, you generally tend to turn on natural gas-fired power plants. That's an intermediate load. I talk more about this in the video, or peak load, so fuel oil type stuff. And then as demand goes down, at night you generally tend to turn that stuff off and then rely on nuclear and hydro and other type of base load stuff. So we look to see if we can find that. So we bring in some data, we subset it based on time of day and look at, well, what's the fuel mix now and what's the fuel during the day and what's the fuel mix at night. Next, we look at Paycheck Protection Program data. So we pull in some data, create some pivot tables to answer some questions about that data. Where generally were the loans made, and so forth. So again, spreadsheet type data, bringing it in, slicing it, dicing it to answer questions that people might have. And then in the next session, this is actually very interesting, particularly if you want to go work in banking, is we use Python to interact with a SQL database. So what we do, so if you're not familiar with SQL, these are large relational databases. So if you want to work in lending, mortgages, auto loans, all this data is going to be housed usually in a SQL database. So learning SQL as a skill is quite useful. And what we're going to do here is we're going to interact with a SQL database from Python. And this is nice because a lot of times you don't want to pull data from a database and do the calculations in Python. It's much easier to do it server side. So you tell Python to send this SQL code. The SQL server executes the SQL code and then returns the data back to you. So that's what we're going to do here. In the next module, we pivot to more scientific computing type tasks. So this is where we're going to do some portfolio optimization, we're going to do some regressions, we're going to do some option pricing, which uses some normal distributions and so forth, samples from normal distributions. Good. So here, like I said, portfolio optimization, and you know what, I'll go ahead and this is kind of interesting. I'll open this Codelab Notebook because I do want to take a look at a Codelab Notebook in a second. So I'll open that in a new tab. So here we run a regression to calculate market depth. So that's Kyle's lambda. I think we do it on cryptocurrency prices. So how much Ethereum do I have to buy, right, before I move the price by a penny, right? So this tells us how deep a market is, right? If it's if it takes a lot of money to move it, then we would say the market's deep. And then lastly, like I said, we do some option valuation. We actually use options to value deposit insurance, right? So this is what banks get from or buy from the FDIC. So we value that deposit insurance provided by the FDIC using a real option approach. This was from a paper by Robert Merton. In the last module, we go over a couple really important topics, right? So first is visualization, right? Python has access to JavaScript libraries. So very often what we're going to do in visualization is we're going to write some Python code that's going to go tell a JavaScript library how to create a visualization. And you can really create some compelling visualizations, some great visualizations this way. So we're going to go over that, different methods to create visualizations. So we'll look at the ecosystem and then look at some JavaScript visualizations. One thing I'll say here is, as a financial analyst, you of course your big goals here is when you bring in data to make sure that data is good, to clean it. Right? A lot of your time is spent cleaning and validating data. And then you're going to do your analysis, and you want your analysis to be done correctly, and you want your numbers should be right. But at the end of the day, there is a little bit of sales to this, and that's where you have your conclusion, right? It might be, I think we should, start making loans here. I think we should start making loans on these types of cars. So that might be your conclusion, but a visualization can really make the case for it. So this is, quite important to have in your toolbox as a financial analyst, being able to create compelling visualizations that really make the case for what you want to say. And then lastly, we go over a couple topics: Git, GitHub, virtual environments, and then IDEs to write your code. Most important one here is probably Git and GitHub. So Git is going to allow us to manage our code. The nice thing about Python code is just text, and so Git's going to allow us to manage this text, manage our code. And what it allows us to do is, if we want to try to create a fix or a new functionality to our code, we can create a new version of the code, and then so we can have multiple versions of whatever code we're writing, and then merge we can merge parts of one version into another. Often, when I try to explain Git to other people, I say something like, it's kind of like Windows track changes, but if Windows track changes is like a bicycle, then Git is like a SpaceX, spaceship, right? It's just much more powerful, much more functionality. It's really amazing. So that's Git. It manages our code. GitHub is actually, it's a Git hosted for you, but it gives you capabilities. Like, for example, this website here is on GitHub, right? Hosted on GitHub. So particularly if you're a student, you want other people to see your code analysis, so you can write your code in Git, push it up to GitHub, so you have your analysis there, and then you can create very easily have it in a web page to show people your conclusions, to show people what you've done. So Git's very powerful, and GitHub, again, for the student is really important because one, it hosts your Git, so you don't have to worry about anything ever being deleted or your hard drive crashing, but also because it allows other people to see your code and other people to see your analysis. Then we look at some virtual environments. This is important because as you have more packages, sometimes you can have version conflicts. I think I use the example here. There's an AI chatbot I'm working on, and I have that in a virtual environment because I run newer versions of TensorFlow now, which are incompatible with it. So if I want to work on that, I go into this virtual environment where all the package versions I know work, and then I can run my code. And then we'll also talk about IDEs. What you're going to do in this course is write code in these notebooks, but let's say you want to write it on your own, which is in the cloud. If you want to write it on your own computer, we talk a little bit about how you might want to do that, and then what you should look for in an environment to write your code. Lastly, I have some bonus material. One of the really interesting things going on in Python is and this is increasing very quickly, is the machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities. So there's two big frameworks, libraries, PyTorch and TensorFlow. PyTorch out of Facebook, TensorFlow out of Google. These are written in C++, but under the hood, but the user interface is in Python. So we can write our deep neural networks in Python. And then, I use PyTorch a lot, and there's also a whole ecosystem built around PyTorch. So there's out of Uber, there's PyTorch's Pyro, which is allows probabilistic. These are regressions, networks, and so forth. What I was going to say is, these are well out of the bounds of a typical. So when I start talking about the ecosystem around PyTorch, this goes now into kind of machine learning. So not typical of a financial analyst type task, but nonetheless really good if you're interested in it. And very powerful. So what I give an example here is how to predict percent changes in small business loans using a deep neural network built in TensorFlow, right? So really interesting. And again, this is, there's a lot of sort of cutting edge finance that is using PyTorch and TensorFlow. And lastly, we calculate portfolio performance measures for various ETFs. I think we use the ARK ETF, so kind of the very popular ARK ETF. We look at how its performance has been relative to the S&P 500 and so forth. Good. So that's an overview of the course. One thing before we go, I want to talk to you about, really important, is the Codelab Notebook. So in each video here, and here I'll have a video and I'll have a Codelab Notebook. The video is going to be me going through the Codelab Notebook and talking about the lesson and then the exercise, right? Everything's going to have a lesson and an exercise. So when you watch that video, what it would be great to do is, in the way I've sort of designed it, is you can have that video open and have me going through it, and then have the actual Codelab Notebook, right, in another, next to it. So as I'm going through the video, you should be going through the notebook with me, right? And you can go ahead and try things, right? And this is what I want you to see. So you should be going through the Codelab Notebook as I go through it. Now, a really important thing for you to know is you can't harm the Codelab Notebook. So sometimes students are like, well, I'm hesitant to try stuff because I'm worried that that I'll break it, right? The best way that you learn is by trying different things, getting errors, and then reading the error. Python has great error messages. Reading the error messages and trying to fix it. So really, to learn, you have to go through this with me and try stuff. Now, when you do this, I created this Codelab Notebook in a different account. So I'm running it now in a different account. So it says this was authored by somebody else. So I'm going to say, okay, that's fine, run anyway. So the thing to keep in mind here is you can now go through, try anything, break stuff, no problem. If you've broken the Codelab Notebook to such that, it'd be too taking to go back and fix all the errors, you can just delete this, go back over here and reopen the Codelab. This is a different one, but go back to the same Codelab Notebook. I think it's the Kyle's Lambda, whatever. This one, go back to that, and you'll have the original Codelab Notebook. So long story short, you can't mess this up. Right? No matter what happens to it, this is your copy of it. You can always delete your copy and then go back to the original one right here. So absolutely, as I'm going through the video, go through it with me, try different stuff, right? So that ran. So you should be going in. So, running this with me right now, it looks like last time I ran this, Ethereum was at 1,917. It's going to be about 3,200 now. So I'll go ahead and rerun that. And yeah, 3,217. So definitely run it along with me as I'm doing it. And don't worry about breaking it. You can always just delete that or not. You just hang on to it, that version, and then go back to the original one here. And then you have a fresh notebook that works. Right? Excellent. So good. I hope you enjoyed the course. Like I said, I'll put the videos up and have a great day. Oh, and I should mention that I'll put the links to this. And if I didn't mention, I'll put the links to this outline in the comments. So you can just go to this and see all the videos and have all the videos in Codelab Notebooks in one spot. But I'll also create a playlist for just the videos. So yeah, have a great day.